Welcome back to the Press Club. Of course, I am Clinton Reynolds, and we are joined by Kami Joseph, news editor and producer at Helen
HTS Radio
System.
100, yes.
Yes, HTS, both radio and television. And of course, going back to the tragedy on November 10th, 2011,
Yes.
when that bus load of people went down Monsieur, and tragically, you know, all of them who have been accounted for lost their lives. So tell us about
it was. I can actually still remember that day because I remember how tired we were because it's been a long work day. And getting home and getting the call from Lovely that there was a horrible accident. She was going out. I said, well, go down and check it out and see what's going on. And then calling Winston to make sure he was still in the studio. And Lovely calling in and recording her actual first account of what is going on, because I mean she's actually there. You could hear the screaming and the crying and the carnage, and putting that on the website. And then 1 year later, now that we've done the remembrance, we actually used that original interview that she gave, parts of it, for the intro, because it was so gripping. I mean, it remains the scariest and the most tragic incident in St. Lucia's history. And all you can think about is all these young kids probably sitting on their mothers, squeezing between the grown-ups, and this bus just careening off this cliff, hitting the water, and all these people dying. And I mean, it's bad enough that that happened, but then the people who came to actually try to help, and all they saw were just bodies floating. You could never imagine. I mean, I can't imagine because I wasn't there how it was. I know when Desmond Collymore, our Southern correspondent, sent us the footage. I mean, and he sent it to us with the bodies. I mean, it was just laying on the sand. They were putting bodies on stretchers, 2, 3, because there were so many of them. And the one survivor hoping that she would make it, but dying as soon as they got to the hospital. I mean, so many things came out of there. What caused the crash, the fact that Monsieur is so far and the ambulance didn't get there fast enough, and the political meetings the SFP were having. I think they were having something down in Castries Southeast, and Flubber was somewhere in Babuno, I think. And
I think they were busy at that point.
Yeah, both
and,
meetings
many so speaking.
Been suspended, and the Prime Minister at the time was even thinking heading down to Monsieur. And I mean, it was, the whole country was just gripped by that, because we showed the funeral service, the mass funeral service in Micoud live. People got to actually see, and they had all the graves, all the caskets, and pictures of all the bodies on top. It was like kind of like how on 9/11. It's something that you're never going to forget, because it was that horrific.
Well, I mean, you would know how much of a news junkie I am. You know, when I got the call, you know, I was discussing with my wife whether I should go
down there, of course.
You know, should I go down? They said, you know, you can't even pass through because the lines are so long going into Monsieur.
No, it was crazy.
And if I leave Summersdale now, it will take me an hour and say an hour and 15 minutes to get there and to get through the crowd.
The Prime Minister was, Stephen King at the time, was trying to get down there. It took him a while to get there because the traffic was, because Collymore was able to get there pretty soon, so he was able to get the boys on the ground. But if you didn't get there right away, people made calls to people, and I mean, it was people from Choiseul who lost, people lost their entire family. We did this in the documentary, Lovely, when it goes back to Micoud, and she shows the home where the driver and his entire family, it's now empty. Nobody lives there because their entire family died in that bus. I mean, people lost, I mean, grandchildren, children. It's horrific to think of 6 people in one family dying one time. You know,
that's sad. It's not a plane crash, it's a bus crash.
Yeah, and it's a bus crash, and then you keep thinking what could have happened, because he seemed to have just jumped over the bus just went over the cliff, and there's a house nearby. They didn't really hear any brakes being pulled or nothing like that. It was just a matter of they just heard screaming, but they were not quite sure, and then you heard the splash, and I mean, and all the carnage.
And I mean, yes, the postmortems were done, right?
Yes.
And you got the
cause of death.
The cause of death. But then I was hearing earlier this week, you know, we have no information yet on toxicology results.
Yeah, and people were still saying we don't know what caused the bus to go over.
People are still speculating as to, you know, whether the driver was drunk. I mean, yes, it's important for us to know, because, you know, it would
prevent the similar thing from happening.
It will speak to our culture and how laxed we are. You know, I see people driving and they have beer bottles in their hand.
Oh no, St. Lucia is...
You know, we're just so happy.
I mean...
You know, and police on the road and nothing...
No, to be a driver in St. Lucia is not for the faint of heart. Let's put it that way. Because I remember when I was in defensive driving, they say you have to drive for yourself and for everybody else on the road. Because the way that they drive is not designed to keep them or you alive. I mean, between the bus drivers, when you're driving in the morning, if you live up north like I do, by the time you get to work on the morning, you're mentally exhausted. You have to physically and mentally be paying attention from Marisville to the morning, because bus drivers will cut you off, other drivers will cut you off, and they'll try to find ways and shortcuts. And to me, you get into all these vehicular crashes that all could have been avoided if you just waited your turn. Because in the way that I look at it, if you late, you're late. You're not going to be any later. You're already late, so just take your time and get there. Because being a commuter is a very tough thing. I mean, I drive, but imagine being on a bus and you have no control over this person driving this bus so fast and all this kind of thing. It must be horrific.
Yeah, but what about, I know that there's a service today.
Yes.
The government put on this major service today for, I guess, the country, in remembrance. But do you have any information on how the families reacted or responded to that call for them to come out? Well,
we spoke to them, like I said, Lovely went down to do the interview, and they were very anxious to know that they would be accommodated, that they'd be able to go down there. And government was providing buses to get them from Micoud, because most of the families are from Micoud to the service, because it was supposed to be a joint service, more or less, with people from Choiseul and people from the affected people, and, you know, having prayers and all that stuff. Because people may forget this, but we are a very Christian country, so we like the idea of going into a church, whether you're a Seventh-day Adventist or a Catholic. Going into a church and having a priest say a prayer over your loved ones is part of our culture. So it's important 1 year afterwards, now that the barricade has been erected, to go back there and pay homage and to pray for their souls, because a lot of people died that day.
You see, now another point here, the barricades have now been erected.
Yes, they're done.
It had to take something like that for someone to notice there's a need for a barricade on that road.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the reality.
We're always reactive, you know, we always do things after the fact. After we lose people, after some tragedy has occurred, then we go around and say, okay, well, probably if we had this here,
it might not have happened. And the whole idea is that I am not familiar with the area itself, but from what I hear from drivers who've been there, it's very, if you're not familiar with it, especially at night, you are going to get into trouble. So hopefully having the barricades there will prevent a similar tragedy. But that's reality. When Jani, who the anniversary of her death was, I think, a couple of weeks ago, when she died, it's the same thing. She went over there. Had there been a barricade, she probably would not have gone over, because she was a fairly inexperienced driver at the time. And as you know, that road to Soufrière, that road is so twisty and a little tricky. So
yeah, it's just cliffs. You're driving. Yeah, you're driving on ridges and along cliffs. Come on.
So it's a sad thing, and what I say to people all the time is, because we are a small country, so these things are always going to be left. If you see a need for something, you should make noise and agitate to get it changed. Because the reality is, it's not just because elections come around once every 5 years, but because these people need you to get into office. If there's an issue, you should put out a town and village council or a minister of something, get it done, because it needs to be done. And we need people like that who are on-the-ground community activists to actually get stuff like that done for these individual pockets of the country that a government might not be aware of. Because at the end of the day, you could end up saving lives, or in this case, 19 lives.
But it's sad. I mean, my heart goes out to them again, all the families. I mean, they, from my information this week, speaking with someone, you know, the people did not, some of them did not want to relive the tragedy, you know, because when they were organizing that service, some of them said, you know, they'd not be coming, because they don't want to open up and rehash what has happened. They don't want to get those gruesome images back in their heads.
You have to be aware of that.
They have, for some of them, they have already closed that chapter.
But it's still fresh. I mean, the reality is that in Lovely's interviews, she spoke to a lot of the people that she spoke to who were still crying. I mean, she spoke to this lady from Choiseul named Priscilla. Her home was where the wake was being held. And she remembers that one of the victims, Samantha, said she ate a plate of food and she went back for another one, and she said, I'm not dying on an empty belly. And she died just minutes after she'd left the house, after she'd eaten the food. So that stays with you, and she's still crying over it. I mean, and the grandmother in Micoud who lost her 3 grandchildren, who remembered the little boy who'd always, you know, in the morning come and ask her for bread and ask her for tea because he was hungry. And she went to the preschool he went to, and the teacher says that the students still draw pictures remembering him and wondering what happened if a shark ate him, because his body was never found. And she remembers him as well because he was such a you know, very active little boy. So 1 year is not that much. I mean, if you think of you losing any loved one, years pass and you still remember something.
Right, exactly.
You smell something or you hear something and they come back. So imagine losing them to such tragic circumstances, wondering to yourself, Did they die before they hit the water? Did they drown? Did they suffer?
Right.
All that stuff is going to keep that that trauma alive in your head.
Yeah, because when I saw the images, and we had the images as well, you know, bodies lined up on the shore,
the bodies were,
stacked
I mean,
up,
it was...
and you have this, them trying to turn over the bus in the water, and you're seeing that every time the surf comes in, you see the heads bobbing up, the bodies.
Yes, because, I mean, one of the guys from Choiseul who was actually in there, because when the bus landed, one of the guys, they swam out, and when he looked in, he saw the dead people in there. I mean, from what I'm hearing, he never fully recovered. Like he screamed. I mean, because to see all these, it's not a movie, it's real life.
It's real.
And apparently, one of the young babies who's still missing, whose body is still missing, was seen on a rock, and the wave picked it up and took it out. He never was able to be recovered again. I mean, the stories. I just imagine this sleepy little Choiseul hamlet, this beautiful beach. I mean, if you were there that night, you go back there, you're never going to be able to forget what you saw there that night.
I remember listening to Lovely as well in that first report, and Lovely was actually torn between an eyewitness and a reporter. So she was trying to report on the incident, and as critical as I am, I set my standards high, and you know that. So, you know, listen, but you know what she's saying, she should not be saying that as a reporter, but then you have to put yourself in her position. She's a witness. She is part of the community coming out to see this. So she's also traumatized, and she's trying to give you an account of what is going on.
The first person who she interviews in the documentary that we aired on Friday was her mother, actually. Her mother who speaks about seeing broken bodies and screaming and crying. Her mother said every woman was crying. It was that emotional. So for Lovely, it's the same thing. You see your mother traumatized, and you are traumatized because this is in your community. You're exhausted after a long day of work, and to come back to see this. I mean, hats off to her because she was able to keep talking and trying to give us an idea of, because nobody really knew how bad it was until she started to describe to you how bad it actually was. And she actually saw it with her eyes. I didn't, and you didn't, and I mean, you know, 1 year later, for her to say she wanted to remember it in that way, I thought it was pretty profound. And I like these kinds of stories because it reminds you of why you get into journalism in the first place. It's your ability to tell a real story.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable. Put people in a story
and tell a story, because people don't care about buildings and governments. They care about people. If you put people in a story, it will stay with. I mean, they care about government and buildings too, but
not already.
Yes, they do. But if you put people in a story, they're able to relate more to them, and they're able to, because I'm sure anybody who saw that on Friday was just moved. I mean, it took us 2 days to edit it. We had Andrew lay down, and we had advisors come in and try to, you know, add some natural sound and make it breathe a little bit in some areas, because it's not a straight news piece, it's a feature piece. And watching it over and over for those 2 days, even when I saw it the night, I was still moved. I thought it was really well done.
I didn't get to see it, so probably you'll give me a copy and I can look at it.
It's on the website.
It is, okay, so I'll look at it. And you said it's 12 minutes? 12 minutes
It's about 10 to 12 minutes. It's longer than a 2.5 minute regular report.
I think it's worth watching, so it's on your website,
yes,
htsolution.com. So you know if you .org.
Yes,
When I was there, it was .com.
Yeah, we've since moved on.
Yeah. So they cut me off and they put org instead. But yeah, but I think it would be worth watching. I don't know what the images are like, so those of you who are faint of heart.
Well, I mean, it's the same way that you know the HS policy. We actually blurred all the images. You're not going to actually see the bodies.
Right.
But you will get to have a sense of exactly what we're showing you, but you won't get to actually see faces of people.
All right, so good work. We'll be looking out for that. When we come back, we'll talk U.S. elections. President
and Barack Obama.
Barack Obama, yes, he's back in the White House. Stay with us. Press Club continues after this break.